Science Fiction University.
Hello and welcome to Science Fiction University.
We're your fan and writer hosts. I'm Blue Gal.
And I'm Driftglass, and you can visit Science Fiction University at our website, sciencefictionuniversity, all one word, .com, where you can also contribute to this podcast. There is a Patreon button at our website, or you can mail us a letter and or contribution to Science Fiction University, P.O. Box 9133, Springfield, Illinois, 62791. And warning, this episode contains spoilers for Andy Weir's 2021 novel Project Hail Mary, Ridley Scott's 2015 adaptation of Andy Weir's 2011 novel The Martian, Robert L. Forward's 1980 novel Dragon's Egg, the Star Trek canon, broadly speaking, and probably some early Heinlein and Spider Robinson. So you have been warned.
Now, over the holiday weekend, we finished up the audiobook of Andy Weir's 2021 novel, Project Hail Mary, as read by Ray Porter. And then we looked at each other and went, you know what? This is Science Fiction University this week. Let's do it. Yeah.
We were in the car like, okay, that's clearly it. This is what we're doing because we really enjoyed it. But first, some important background information about your hosts. Blue Gal, are we book reviewers?
No, we're not.
No. Last time I checked, no. Then why do we do this if we're not book reviewers, Blue Gal?
Well, because we're fans, Driftglass.
That's right.
We're science fiction nerds from way back. I know that's why you love me.
Well, many, many reasons, one of which, yes, in the top 17 reasons. Yes.
One of the things that he just says, oh my God, I found this woman and she also likes science fiction.
She likes good science fiction and really bad science fiction.
Like, I remember the time when you discovered that I had the anthology of time travel stories on my bookshelf before you met me.
And
you looked at me like, are you a magic pixie dream girlfriend?
Yes, she is. She's a magic pixie dream wife as well. So suck it, people who aren't married to Fran. So deal with it.
Anyway, but we're also writers. And in addition to loving this stuff, we can also look at the bones of the books and the movies we love. And we talk about this with each other all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Driftglass, I should take a drink every time he says, that reminds me of a Robert Heinlein story.
Right.
I'd have alcohol poisoning. But we talk about story arcs and character development and compare it to other things we've seen.
Yeah.
And, talk knowledgeably about this stuff because Driftglass has written science fiction stories and I'm a big fan. So
I've had a few published, minor published, but published.
So this is,
and I've written them and studied them and studied with Phyllis Eisenstein, the late great Phyllis Eisenstein at Columbia College, and had a story of mine recommended to his publisher after his edits by Harlan Ellison. So I'm not George R.R. Martin, but I have some chops and I know what I'm talking about. And all that is true. And another reason we're not book reviewers is because that is a full-time job. And there are book reviewers who do this full-time. We respect them immensely. But we read mostly for pleasure. And there are just a ridiculous number of science fiction novels published every year. This is from Gary K. Wolfe and the Locus, remember Locus magazine blog, in February of 2009. So that's 15 years ago. This is what Gary writes, quote, in 1954, when I was 9 years old, there were approximately 74 science fiction titles published. Locus reports 1,669 titles, including fantasy, horror, etc., for 2008. There were 254 science fiction novels and 436 fantasy novels alone. The rest would presumably be horror, anthologies, novellas, collections, and things that don't really fit into either category, unquote. So in 2008, roughly 254 science fiction novels were published. Now, some were undoubtedly re-releases of older novels and things like that, but Jesus, that's a lot of books. That's an awful lot of books. And the rate of publication has only gone up since then. It's skyrocketed.
Absolutely astronomical. This is from Elite Publishing Company, February 2023, an article entitled The Growth of Science Fiction, How Many Books Are Published Each Year? You know what? Somebody got paid to write that title.
Yes, they did. They very much did.
Quote, the science fiction genre has seen significant growth in recent years, with an increasing number of books being published each year. It is difficult to estimate the exact number of science fiction books that are published each year, but it is clear that the number is growing. According to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America, the number of science fiction and fantasy novels published in the United States alone has increased by more than 50% in the last decade. The number of books published each year is likely to continue to grow as the genre continues to expand and evolve. You know, that could have been written by AI, Driftglass.
It probably was, Blue Gal. It's cheaper. It's cheaper.
So why? Why is this genre growing so fast? Is it just Marvel movies are making money?
It's awesome because it's awesome.
Because it's awesome. That's why.
It's awesome.
So the article cites a few factors like the rise of self-publishing, the emergence of digital books, the genre's popularity, we're mainstream now, the genre's diversity. It encompasses a wide variety of subgenres such as hard science fiction, cyberpunk, steampunk, time travel, alternate history, young adult, time travel romance.
Oh, yeah.
It's a big one.
A bunch of stuff.
And so science fiction is being written by authors all over the world. And finally, there is the expansion of the genre. Quote, science fiction is no longer a niche genre. It is expanding to reach to other forms of media such as movies, TV series, and video games, which in turn is driving interest in books of the genre.
Absolutely. The number of video games that have been turned into novels and
or
movies
yeah.
is amazing.
Yeah.
And that's great because that means the complexity of the storytelling hopefully is getting more and more interesting and more plot driven and more accessible to people, which is cool. And just to correct the record, Blue Gal, one of the reasons I do like jabber on a little bit about Asimov and Heinlein and things like that is they really did lay down the tracks for the genre itself. So a lot of what you read now just inevitably goes back to those writers, the same way creating life stories are going to go back to Mary Shelley.
Right.
That's the progenitor, and you got to respect
these guys
them.
were prolific.
Yep.
And they explored lots of different plot lines. Mm-hmm. And it's very hard to write an original plot that doesn't owe something
absolutely
to one of the greats. It just is.
It is.
Right?
Now, as every modern reviewer knows, of every kind of medium, they'll tell you we are currently drowning in content. I listen to movie review content. I listen to television reviews, podcasts, and they can't keep up. They're just, everyone's drowning in it. It's just a fire hose of music and literature and art and film and television, just everything. And some of it's really great. And a lot of it is actually pretty good. And a lot of it is just schlock, just god-awful. And when it's really, really bad, it's really good. Which is why we don't review books. We break down examples of science fiction we enjoy and try to explain where it came from and why it works. We are, for lack of a better term, the con suite at WindyCon at 2 a.m. We're sitting up there with our friends having beers, talking deeply about science fiction. And this month, our subject is a pretty good novel, which was also a terrific audiobook that won the 2022 Audio Award, Audiobook of the Year, and that's The Hail Mary Project.
It won for across all genres.
Yeah.
Audiobook of the Year across all genres. So that's a big deal. Yeah. Now, this is a classic hard science fiction novel.
Yes.
A fictional threat that must be faced with plausibly advanced existing science and technology. There's no faster of light travel, no time travel, no magic, no pixie dust. The threat is a completely alien life form, which is, spoilers, eating the sun.
Nom, 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 nom.
Nom, nom, nom. The novel, which is set in the near future, is the story of the discovery of a threat, which comes to be named astrophage. And we don't know if it's plant or animal or mineral or whatever it is, but it is literally blocking out the sun.
It's absorbing the sun. It's eating the sun. It's not just blocking it out. It is eating it, consuming it. Yep.
Bro, is dead.
Supreme Court has delivered another blow to the Voting Rights Act.
Despite growing dangers from climate change, tonight the U.S. Supreme Court curbing the government's power to fight it.
The makeup of the Supreme Court, the decisions they have already handed down, and the cases they are hearing this year are not coincidental. So what is next? What can we expect from this chaos court and the networks at work to serve them up cases that will expedite their agenda? We'll seek to answer those questions, examining issues at the heart of the cases the court is currently deciding. Follow Grave Injustice wherever you get your podcasts. We're releasing episodes every Thursday throughout the season.
And we learn that it is, because part of this is they got to find out what this thing is. It's a microbial life form that exhibits seemingly impossible characteristics, such as maintaining a constant body temperature regardless of whether it is exposed to extreme heat or extreme cold. So we can be on the surface of the sun and still be 96 degrees.
Right, which is something's going on.
Yeah. And it appears that nothing can kill this stuff.
Right. If everything you throw at it, from absolute zero to a thermonuclear reaction, it just shrugs off. And it's
and
multiplying.
Keeps eating the sun.
And it's growing. And it's multiplying. How do you stop this thing? So the novel is one long race against time. The solar system is doomed unless humans can get a sample of astrophage, figure out how it works, and most importantly, how to stop it. Unfortunately, it appears that the answer to that question, if there is an answer at all, can only be found 12 light years away, which is a very long way away, and a final hope for the human race, which is why it's, Hail Mary. As we talked about in our episode on Neuromancer and 2001: A Space Odyssey, literary conflicts have historically fallen into one of 5 categories. There's person against person against themselves, a person against fate or the gods, person against nature, and a person against society. And we went through a whole bunch of examples of each of those back in that podcast. Then along came science fiction and horror, and we added 2 more distinct types of conflict to those plot conflicts. Person versus the alien or the unknown, and a person versus technology. So in addition to this being a classic hard science fiction novel, this is also not one of the 2 new categories of conflict that science fiction and horror added to the mix. Instead, this is an old school person versus nature story, like Old Man in the Sea, except the nature this time is a space bug called astrophage that's eating the sun.
This also means that there are no villains, per se. I mean, astrophage is not running around twirling its mustache.
No.
I mean, we're going to eat the sun. It's a bug of some kind.
Yeah,
right?
It does not expect James Bond to die.
No, it's not. Yeah. It has no personality. It's simply a thing. Right. It's a bug of some kind that just eats the sun. And so you can't, it doesn't get personified in any way. There's no Darth Vader in this movie or in this book. There's no Thanos to root against. And this is also true of Andy Weir's 2011 novel, The Martian. In fact, both novels have a lot of similarities, which can give the reader some insight into the author's preferences and worldview. There are characters that you can like or dislike according to your personal tastes. Now, Driftglass and I both think that in The Martian, NASA Chief Administrator Teddy Sanders is kind of an asshole.
Very much an asshole.
He's an administrator, and neither of us think his motives were less than honorable.
Right.
He doesn't want to kill astronauts.
Right, exactly. He wants to pursue the safe course.
Yeah, but he's a suit, and, that's what he is. He made what were perfectly defensible choices based on the risk assessment of the situation. One of the things that The Martian sets the whole plot of The Martian off is leaving Mark Watney behind. And it is a perfectly understandable thing that the astronauts did. It is perfectly innocent in terms of no one twirled their mustache and said, ha, 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 we're going to leave this man on Mars. It was an accident. It was a storm. They presumed he was dead. His suit and all of the communications said he was dead. So for their own safety, they left. And of course, they felt horrible when they found out he wasn't dead.
Unlike, say, the first half of the first season of Lost in Space, which has a saboteur. Dr. Smith works for the Reds.
Yeah.
Before he turned into like a screaming fop who is the comic relief, he was a saboteur. He was there to destroy the mission and kill everybody aboard, and he got stuck on board, and that's where the plot comes from. But there is no such person in this in either of these novels. There's just people.
There's no bad guy doing this. It's an accident. And so, this is how the moral structure of the novel is. There is no bad guy. It's a problem to be solved. So, also in Project Hail Mary, there is a single-minded autocratic administrator calling the shots. Her name is Eva Straught.
Eva Straught.
And boy, is she German.
Boy, Dutch, I think. But yeah.
She does not care who or what has to be pushed aside in service of the mission. If we have to pave over the Sahara Desert, so be it. If we have to commandeer aircraft carriers and entire space programs, so be it. If we have to kidnap and drug people to get the mission done, so be it. We're in the business of saving the Earth and saving the sun from astrophage. That's the only thing that matters. And she can bulldoze anyone's constitutional rights in order to get this done.
And the United Nations gave her that power.
Yeah.
That's not an issue. She's not acting in a rogue way. She has been handed this on the assumption that if we don't fix this, we're all dead. We're all going to die.
There's a big argument in The Martian over satellite time.
Right.
There is no argument over satellite time with Eva Straught. She gets whatever she wants today.
Today, right now.
And so Straught says that after the project is over, after they actually succeed, hopefully, in destroying the astrophage and saving life on Earth, she fully expects to be tried for war crimes.
Yeah.
And she doesn't care.
Right.
I don't care. I will deal with that at that time. Right now, we are saving the Earth. And her personality is that way. This is the mission. What you want, you're going to go on a suicide mission. We don't care. We don't care. So only the mission matters. Nothing else matters. The end.
And that's also a common characteristic if you've read The Martian in both Andy Weir novels. At some point, the only thing that matters is the mission. In The Martian, one man's life is at stake. In Project Hail Mary, the fate of humanity hangs in the balance. But in both cases, the success of the mission becomes the all-consuming objective. That's it. And to get her done, it's going to require the best minds available, which isn't surprising. You get all the smartest people you can into a room and try to solve this problem. But it'll also require that someone you would not ordinarily pick to save the day to rise to the occasion. That's what makes the plot interesting. Or fail with disastrous consequences for everyone. Like, say, a botanist being the guy who gets stranded on Mars. Or a high school physics teacher with intermittent amnesia on his way to Tau Ceti to save the day. Now, having read The Martian and Project Hail Mary, I can say that Andy Weir definitely has a very distinctive voice. And by that, I mean, like, you can tell when a script is written by Rod Serling or J. Michael Straczynski or stories by Arthur C. Clarke or Octavia Butler. It's the way they write. It's the words they choose. You can always tell Ray Bradbury's story, the pace, the way their characters talk. And after a while, you can hear the author's voice behind the plots and the characters. So Weir reads like early Robert Heinlein or Spider Robinson, very much like that to me. And it leaped right to mind when I first read The Martian, and it's confirmed by Project Hail Mary. There's a recognizable world populated by believable people, all with flaws. Characters are competent. There's a reverence for science and engineering and what technology can do if it's used properly. There's also kind of a playful chattiness woven into the narrative and dialogue that moves even the most monumental events along with a very light touch, with a very competent but very light touch. And above all, there's a fundamental belief in humanity. These people don't hate the human species or think that we're doomed to die. There's a belief that at the end of the day, no matter how bad things get, our species will pull itself together and will do the right thing, even if we have to slog through an ocean of shit to get there. That things we have in common might just be strong enough to save us. Or in the case of Project Hail Mary, save us and, again, spoiler alert, our new friends, the 5-legged spider-like aliens of 40 pop.
2003.
The 5-legged spider-like aliens of 40 Iridni, who are facing the same problem. Well, not aliens plural, just one alien, who is our protagonist, named Rocky.
Rocky is a skilled engineer, but not a scientist. He was part of a much larger crew, all of whom have died. He's alone on his ship. This is something that Rocky and our human protagonist, Ryland Grace, have in common. They were both sent to Tau Ceti in the first of their kind ships with specialist crews to figure out why astrophage is affecting other stars in the local area, but not Tau Ceti. What is special about Tau Ceti that makes it somehow immune to astrophage?
Mm-hmm.
Or doesn't taste good to astrophage, or whatever it is. They need to find that out.
Astrophage is present, but it's not killing their star, which
right.
is
It's
weird.
not eating the sun. Right.
Right.
But en route, every other Iridian except Rocky dies from interstellar radiation poisoning, which the Iridians didn't know existed.
Mm-hmm.
Rocky, as one of the lower ranked people on the ship, spent most of the trip down with the engines, and so had been insulated from the radiation. Ryland Grace is also the sole surviving human on his ship. All the highly trained experts on both ships are dead,
Mm-hmm.
leaving only an alien engineer and a high school physics teacher to save their respective worlds.
Mm-hmm. Can they do it? Can they do it, Blue
Can
Gap?
they do it together? Can they work together? Can they overcome their differences? It sounds a lot like a can't-lose plot from a 1719 novel, Jerk Glass. Can you guess which one?
Yeah.
Here's a hint.
You will experience all the heart-pounding suspense of this first two-man space probe, traveling more than 71 million astromiles toward Mars.
Yes, that was 1964's Robinson Crusoe on Mars. So, Andy Weir, sorry, but somebody else got there first. It is a film advertised as, quote, scientifically authentic. It's only one step ahead of present reality. Truly a science fact story. The incredible adventures of a lone astronaut spaceship wrecked on the fiery planet Mars, unquote. I cannot tell you how much is wrong with those sentences in this short a podcast. But let's assume all of that is true, except for, a few minor details, like
the scorching surface of the fire swamp that is Mars. A world no man has ever seen, and now one man must explore alone.
And
finding water. Discovering a source of nourishment. But unable to lick the most terrifying problem of all.
You gotta face the reality of being alone forever.
The devastating laser beams with which spacemen from the constellation Orion excavate the rare minerals of Mars.
Now, this very cheesy movie was, of course, inspired by the 1719 novel by Daniel Defoe. It is a solid plot.
Mm-hmm.
You can spin the story of a man stranded and alone against the elements in a lot of ways. Swiss Family Robinson, Lost in Space, Castaway. Think about Castaway. He's all by himself, has to find food.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, Robinson Crusoe on Mars.
The best of the bunch, really. The very best, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's got Batman from the TV's Batman.
Adam West.
Adam West is one of the spaceship guys.
Yeah, and a chimp. It's got a chimp. So
it's got a chimp.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there's the Martian. Again, all by himself. Got to survive. And between the Martian and Project Hail Mary, Andy Weir, the author, has allocated different elements of the original plot. In The Martian, Mark Watney is definitely stranded and alone, but once he makes contact with Earth, he can communicate with NASA and coordinate plans with them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he even complains, like, now that they can contact me, they never stop emailing. I'm so sick of it.
They won't shut up. They won't
shut up.
Yeah.
In Project Hail Mary, Ryland Grace is also stranded and alone, and he even has a Friday companion, just like Robinson Crusoe, who is also seemingly stuck there, but he's not lost and trying to find a way home. He's right where the project team sent him, and there never was a plan to return home.
But back to Rocky the Iridian. Now, he's a kind of magic pixie dream alien. He's almost too good to be true. He's an engineer with a capital E who can manufacture just about anything Ryland needs to any specifications, no matter how microscopic, all overnight, using a magic material that the Iridians have invented that is harder than anything known to human beings. Then again, Rocky was, in fact, sent along, presumably as the very best engineer the Iridians had. So, we'll let that one pass. That makes sense. He's going to be very, very, very good at his job. However, what makes Rocky a standout is how much attention Andy Weir paid to creating a truly alien alien. These are not Star Trek aliens with a little bit of prosthetics on their head. Iridians live for centuries. Their bodies are enclosed in like a rocky shell, a carapace made of rock. Their blood is apparently liquid mercury. Their internal organs use heavy metals. They breathe superheated ammonia, which would kill you if you breathed it for a fraction of a second. And they live in an environment where the ambient temperature will melt lead. They live in total darkness and have no sense of sight, but a phenomenal sense of hearing. And their engineering is all based on Newtonian physics. So when Ryland tries to explain the quantum physics and relativity and time dilation, Rocky thought he was like kidding, like pulling one of his many, many legs. Like, come on, man, don't bullshit me. That's crazy. That's magic.
So here we have a genuinely alien creature with whom we share nothing but a common problem and the universal laws of mathematics. There is no Star Trek Universal Translator or Hitchhiker's Guide Babelfish. Instead, our two travelers have to slowly develop a shared vocabulary. No surprise, then, that given the kind-heartedness and hopefulness of the author, underneath the Iridians are a lot like us.
They're just a lot like us down deep.
They grieve, they get impatient, they can be sarcastic, they can be happy. Happy, happy, happy.
Happy, happy, happy means really happy.
Really happy. He just says it 3 times. And they're persistent.
Yeah.
Rocky had already been at Tau Ceti all alone for 47 Earth years, working the problem and failing over and over again when Ryland arrives.
Yeah. And there was no way he was ever going to solve the problem until someone with eyesight and a knowledge of quantum physics and his other half arrived to solve the problem jointly. Now, doing this is a genuinely impressive accomplishment. And as I was reading it, I was reminded immediately of a 1980 novel that some of you might have read called Dragon's Egg. Now, we briefly mentioned Dragon's Egg by the late Robert L. Forward last episode as an example of hard science fiction. And although I seem to recall Forward using some hyperspace hocus pocus to get a human expedition to the constellation of Draco, hence the name Dragon's Egg, which is somewhere between 92 and 154 light years from where we are right now, once he got us there, Forward remained very, very scientifically rigorous, as much as he could given the state of science in 1980. In the novel, Forward imagines a race of sentient creatures which could develop on a neutron star with a surface gravity 67 billion times that of Earth, which is, pretty impressive. He calls them the Chila. They are intelligent creatures the size of a sesame seed who live and think and develop 1 million times faster than human beings. Most of the novel, which is just a few months long from May until June of 2050, charts the Chila civilization beginning with its discovery of agriculture to advanced technology, and then to its first face-to-face contact with humans who were observing the hyper-rapid evolution of the Chila civilization in orbit around the Dragon's Egg. A major problem in this contact is that Chila live 1 million times more quickly than humans do. A Chila year goes by in about 30 seconds. So if you blink, you miss, the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. The humans arrive when the Chila are a savage, backward species. fighting rival clans in a subsistence-level society. Within a few human days, the equivalent of a few thousand years on Chila or on the Dragon's Egg, the Chila surpass the humans in technology, and the humans are then affectionately referred to by the Chila as the slow ones.
Aw.
Yeah. First they worship us, then they equal us, and actually, as I recall, they zip off using their ships to our sun to remove 3 or 4 small black holes that were threatening to destroy our sun. We didn't even know they were there, but they said, we're going to do you a solid. So it's a big deal imagining a truly alien species. So way to go, Andy Weir. You did a really good job on this one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that Andy Weir emphasizes in both novels is the very basic necessity of food.
Mm-hmm.
Air and water are important, but Mark Watney in The Martian and Ryland Grace in Project Hail Mary both have plenty of air and water.
Mm-hmm.
But food is a different story. In both novels, our protagonist starts out not worrying about food.
Mm-hmm.
Then the first crisis comes, and suddenly, food becomes very important.
Mm-hmm.
Will they have enough? Maybe. But then a second crisis comes, and a third, and now their diet, which was sufficient, looks like it's going to be either barely edible, barely sufficient, or both. At one point, both characters start to think about how long it would be until they starve to death.
Mm-hmm.
But Project Hail Mary goes a step further. The character of Eva Stratt, who, as you remember, is the bossy administrator who's bulldozing everyone, the whole world.
Who never lets down her guard and does, soliloquies. Asides. She's always on point.
But here she does. All of a sudden, she goes on a longish soliloquy about the history of food, about how the further back in history you go, the more miserable you were likely to be.
Mm-hmm.
How the overwhelming majority of pre-industrial human labor was dedicated to procuring food, growing it, hunting it, stealing it.
Mm-hmm.
Crop failures. One crop failure meant mass starvation. And the collapse of civilizations. Wars were fought over grain. If there was a war, that meant the crop didn't come in and people died of starvation.
Yeah, if the army went through and stripped your crops, you all died.
Right.
If the army was made up of people who ran farms, who had farms, they had to leave and do the harvest, or next year people would starve. It's just amazing how focused everyone is on finding enough protein to live.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so this is Andy Weir telling his readers, stop for a moment and think about how good you've got it compared to any other time in history.
Yeah, this really is the author's voice coming through and saying, just take a breath and realize how privileged you are and how much you actually have. Now, the two novels are also both structured in very similar ways, with promises and payoffs. And I forget where I heard this first, but it's true of almost all good fiction. You make your audience a promise in the first chapter or the first few pages, and then you pay that off in the second chapter or the second bunch of pages. At the same time you pay off, you make another promise, a second promise, and then you pay that off a little bit later, and on and on and on, all the way through the story. You pull them through the story with promises and payoffs. And this is nothing new. This is as old as the Odyssey. And it's a very solid way to build a novel. Drama, comes from conflict. From a protagonist struggling to overcome one obstacle and then another, and eventually succeeding or failing. And Andy Weir, speaking through his protagonist in The Martian, if you listen with a writer's ear, you can hear Andy Weir explaining how this plot structure works at the end of the novel and at the end of the movie.
At some point, everything's going to go south on you. Everything's going to go south, and you're going to say, this is it. This is how I end. Now, you can either accept that, or you can get to work. That's all it is. You just begin. You do the math. You solve one problem, then you solve the next one, and then the next. And if you solve enough problems, you get to come home.
Now, both novels cross-cut their story to keep things lively. They jump from one thing to another and back again. Now, since the plot of The Martian takes place in 3 primary locations, that'll be Mars, Earth, and the Ares spacecraft, the cross-cutting is done between those places. Very clear. You go from location to location to location at the same time, or roughly during the same time. On the other hand, Project Hail Mary is a very linear story told entirely from Ryland Grace's point of view. So cross-cutting is not done between location to location. It's done between the past and the present, with almost all scene shifts to the past representing a fragment of recovered memory. And just for the record, both stories end in a remarkably similar way.
Yeah.
When you get through Project Hail Mary, you'll go, oh, okay, got it.
We know
Yeah.
what your values are, Andy Weir. We
Yeah,
know
we do.
what you think people should be doing.
And
Yes.
you know where you get your joy. You know where you get your pleasure from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are also some ways in which these two novels are very different. And we noticed this right away when we started listening to Project Hail Mary. This review of Project Hail Mary from readfinebooks.com, quote, Project Hail Mary is officially recommended for ages 14 plus. It doesn't have swearing in it.
Yay.
And this was a parent reviewing The Martian. Quote, great book. I loved almost everything about this book, but it's definitely not appropriate for 14-year-olds like Common Sense recommends. There are at least 100 F words and numerous other profanities, unquote.
Mm-hmm.
Which is true. Starting with The Martian's opening sentence, quote, I'm pretty much fucked. That's my considered opinion. Fucked, unquote.
Mm-hmm.
We rewatched The Martian this weekend to prep for this show, and the version we watched was a television version where they had cut the swearing back considerably. But even in the uncut original, there are no F-bombs. But it cracked us up how very non-sweary Project Hail Mary was. I mean, it's almost like Andy Weir had heard the criticism and said, fine, I'll write a book with no swears in it.
Yeah, see how you like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of, oh my goodness, and I'll be darned. Dag nabbit. It's that kind of thing.
In the middle of world-ending disasters, it's like, gosh darn it, I wish things had gone a little better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But other than the amount of screwing taking place among the crew of the Hail Mary during training, it would have been 100% suitable for serialization in Boy's life in 1964.
Absolutely.
I feel as though Andy Weir's agent told him, write a non-sweary book this time, because The Martian made parents nervous.
Yeah. They'd love to have that book for their kids, but
right.
But
and
no
there's a big
swears.
market for science fiction books about adventure like this for the 12 to 14 set. And mom won't buy it for them if it's got lots of F-bombs in it.
We've talked about Kay Tarrant before, who was the editor at Astounding Magazine, who would just cross out anything suggestive of sex or profanity or anything. And it's like her spirit hovered over this novel and said, nope, 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 nope. And that's fine. It's still a good novel. We sure enjoyed it. It's a good book and it's a fun book and we both liked it. But like The Martian, it does have its flaws. In The Martian, for example, the inciting incident is a massive dust storm so powerful that it threatened to tip over the crew's ship, and they were forced to abort the mission. The storm also ripped loose an antenna, which slammed into Watney, blowing him dozens of yards away and doing the kind of damage to his medical readouts that convinced the rest of the crew, who were blinded by the storm, that Watney was dead. They had to leave or they were all going to die. The problem is, no such dust storm can possibly exist on the planet Mars, period. The most you're going to get during the biggest storm is a light breeze. So, do we care? No, we do not care, because that's silly. I was reminded when I read this criticism of an interview that Arthur Clarke did about his hard science fiction novel, The Fountains of Paradise, which is about the construction of humanity's first space elevator, which is very cool. Now, in the novel, the elevator had to be built on a specific geostationary spot at the equator, very, very specific place. So Clarke invented the fictional equatorial island country of Taprobany, where it needed to be for the science of the novel to work. Clarke described Taprobany as, quote, about 90% congruent with the island of Sri Lanka, which is where he lived, unquote, but south of the real-world location of Sri Lanka. After all, what are a few hundred kilometers between friends? Now, he did the same thing with, as I recall, Imperial Earth. There was a genetic mistake in one of the characters that caused him to come back to Earth to get a clone done. But the genetic failure, his sterility, was caused by radiation. And in the novel, it's a generational thing. At the age of 20 or 25 or 30, you go back to Earth and you have your clone made. And after the novel was published, some geneticist or doctor said, you know that radiation sterility isn't inheritable, right? It's something that happens to you, but your son is going to be able to make babies, right? And Clark went, oh, shit. That's in the novel, but we forgive them because they're such good novels, and these are minor nitpicks compared to what we get out of them. In Project Hail Mary, Weir creates a somewhat more glaring workaround for the sake of the plot when he afflicts our protagonist with severe but gradually diminishing amnesia that has him stumbling around the spaceship trying to figure out where he is and why he's there. The idea that the project team would have launched this Earth-saving, once-in-a-lifetime, live or die ship to Tau Ceti without checklists everywhere outlining in detail what needed to be done and in what order is just silly. That's just silly. That's nothing would ever happen.
That's not how NASA brains work.
No, at all. Today, that's not how it works.
Fail safe checklist.
And checklist. Lots and lots of lists of things to do and how to do it. How not to open the space toilet at the wrong moment to get your ass sucked out. Now, maybe Ryland wouldn't have found them right away, but on any space mission, there are going to be checklists. So come on. Right. It's just
That's
silly.
Right. The amnesia thing is also one of the places where the flaws and seams of the plot peek through. For narrative purposes, the author needs Ryland Grace to have a faulty memory, where the past comes back to him only in flashes. Mm-hmm. Plus, the journey the crew will be on will take years to complete. So the author imagines plausible medical coma machines, which theoretically can keep the crew asleep for years. But one side effect might be temporary amnesia. Or is Ryland's slowly receding amnesia caused by something else? Something more sinister. Either way, the amnesia is clearly something which was reverse engineered into the story for narrative and plot reasons. And it can come across as a little too convenient.
Yeah.
Now, do we care? No, we do not.
No, we do not.
No, we do not. Finally, we wanted to zoom out to a much bigger picture of the science fiction genre and what we read and enjoy. If you listen to our political podcasts or read our blogs or just overhear us talking at Charlie Parker's Diner or Lulu's Diner, you know we're not Pollyannas.
No.
We're pretty clear-eyed about the state of the world, the state of American democracy, and, some of the bad trajectories that are out there. It's pretty grim from time to time. On a recent political podcast, we talked about the world as our kids have known it. The world of 9/11, an economic collapse, a once-in-a-century pandemic, we hope, global climate change, school shootings, etc. Now, your mileage may vary, but who wants to read a story about brain-dead zombies destroying everything when right here in real life we have an entire political party of real brain-dead zombies really trying to destroy everything?
Yeah, it's not escapist literature.
No, it's not.
No.
When you think about the kinds of entertainment our parents and grandparents turned to during the Great Depression and World War II, think of Busby Berkeley.
Oh, yeah.
It seemed like the end of the world, the Depression did. And Hitler he took over Paris, for God's sakes. So what comes to mind for entertainment during those times? And for some insight into that, we turn to this.
I want to make a comedy.
Save us some embarrassment. He doesn't want to make a Brother Roth now. He wants to make a comedy.
He don't mean that, boss. He's still a little stir-crazy.
Oh, yes, I do. Oh, no, I'm not.
You're joking, aren't you, Sully? It's in bad taste, but it's a joke.
No.
But it's had more publicity than the Johnstown flood. What are we going to do with all that publicity?
Oh, brother.
Why, don't you want to make old brother where art thou, Sully?
Well, in the first place, I'm too happy to make, O brother, where art thou? In the second place, I haven't suffered enough to make, O brother, where art thou?
You haven't suffered enough.
He hasn't suffered enough.
No.
But, Sully...
I'll tell you something else. There's a lot to be said for making people laugh. Did you know that's all some people have? It isn't much, but it's better than nothing in this cockeyed caravan.
That was Preston Sturges' 1941 masterpiece, Sullivan's Travels.
Yeah.
That's just the last minute or so. If you've never seen it, you really should see the whole thing. It's just terrific. It's a great, great movie.
It's aged
and it has really important lessons for today.
Yes, it does. Privilege, race, cluelessness, Hollywood.
Total cluelessness.
It's wonderful. It's a wonderful movie.
But as science fiction fans in 2024, we're not saying we'll only read comedies. Don't get us wrong. We think stories like, for instance, Station 11, which is post-apocalyptic.
It absolutely is.
The Handmaid's Tale.
Mm-hmm.
Those stories are amazing. But the glut of apocalyptic and post-apocalypse stories at a time when the world seems ready to write humanity off as a bad idea is sometimes just more melancholy and misery than we personally can stand.
Mm-hmm.
This quote from the website The Portalist sums it up pretty well. Quote, "One of the core reasons Project Hail Mary is such a masterpiece is because it exemplifies the concept of feel-good science fiction. A lot of science fiction hinges around end-of-the-world themes or scary creatures, murderous aliens, death, destruction, and progress gone awry." Mm-hmm. Unquote. Think World War Z.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right?
It's and you can, there's no lack of that. If that's your thing, go with God and enjoy it. It's just there's a point at which it's too much.
Yeah.
And I want to read something like Project Hail Mary. Now, consider, for example, this summary of the future history of a well-known science fiction franchise. Can you guess which one? Quote, "World War III was the last of Earth's three world wars, lasting from approximately 2026 to 2053. The conflict involved nuclear cataclysm, as well as genocide and eco-terrorism. The post-atomic horror in the aftermath persisted as late as 2079. The war was preceded by the eugenics wars." That should be a big clue if you didn't know already. "And the Second Civil War, all of which were sometimes regarded as parts of a single escalating conflict. It resulted in the deaths of some 30% of the human population, at least 600 million people, and the extinction of 600,000 species of animals and plants. By the end, most of the major cities had been destroyed, and there were few governments left," unquote. That horrifying scenario is the canonically accepted prehistory of Earth before the founding of United Earth, and then the United Federation of Planets and Starfleet in the Star Trek universe. One of the most hopeful, uplifting, forward-looking shows on television, period. Now, Gene Roddenberry wasn't blind to the human condition. He just believed that, in the end, humanity's compassion and sense of justice and desire for peace would win out against prejudice, fear, and hatred. That while it might take a traumatic catastrophe for us to finally wake up and get our shit together, eventually we will. And that when we do, our potential as a species that is finally at peace with ourselves and our environment will be limitless. And that's the charm of Project Hail Mary. That while many may die and our sacrifices will be great, we can be better. We can save ourselves and maybe make some new friends along the way.
And we highly recommend that you listen to that book. The audiobook is just great.
Yeah.
And Science Fiction University is a project of DGBG Productions. You can support the show by donating via Patreon at patreon.com/ProLeftPod. See you next time.
See you next time.